Welcome to the webinar, everyone. My name is Andreas Bitsarakis, and I am the Director of Broadband at Select Spectrum. I manage the 2.5 gigahertz spectrum lease auction for the company, and I would like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us today. We will be covering many of the benefits of including your educational institution's educational broadband service license in Select Spectrum's 2.5 gigahertz spectrum lease auction. Also, we'll be covering some basic information about the 2.5 gigahertz licenses, including a brief history of the EBS band, FCC rules, a summary of the previous auction, and current leasing opportunities. Please note we do have some time set aside at the end of the presentation for any questions. To begin, let's take a look at how the educational broadband service has evolved over time. EBS was established in 1963 and formerly known as the Instructional Television Fixed Service. The service was designed to serve as a means for educational institutions to deliver live or pre-recorded instructional television to multiple sites within school districts and to higher education branch campuses. In the late 1970s, the FCC recognized that too many ITFS licensees lacked the technical expertise and financial means to make more effective use of the service, and the FCC authorized licensees to lease out a portion of their spectrum designated as excess capacity. In 1998, the FCC gave permission to allow for two-way fixed data service on these types of licenses, and many companies leased these licenses for two-way fixed data, but in 2005, the FCC repurposed the band to allow for two-way mobile services, and that is what really has driven the full value of the licenses today. Now let's take some time talking about the 2.5 gigahertz band plan and how these licenses look from a spectral view. The 2.5 gigahertz band is a total of 194 megahertz, starting at 2496 up to 2690 megahertz, and the band is split into two different categories. The first category is EBS licenses, which are represented by the salmon color on the chart that you see on the screen. EBS licenses make up about 5/8 of the band and are unique in that they can only be held by educational institutions. The other category is BRS, or Broadband Radio Service, and these are represented by the green and blue channels on the chart. BRS licenses can be held by anyone, including commercial entities, and the bulk of these licenses are owned by Sprint. A typical EBS license is 4 channels or 22.5 megahertz. Take, for example, the A channel block. A1, A2, and A3 are in the lower band and are 5.5 megahertz each for a total of 16.5 megahertz. The other portion of the license, A4, is 6 megahertz and is located in the middle band for a total of 22.5 megahertz for the entire license. Some licenses are less and very few are more than the 22.5 megahertz. There are basically 2 commercial uses for these licenses. The first is mobile wireless networks, and the second is fixed wireless networks. Sprint has built a 4G mobile wireless network which covers roughly 60% of the nation's population, in which a signal is beamed to end users on their cell phones or other mobile devices from a cell tower. Then there are the fixed wireless networks, which Ditch Network and many smaller companies have constructed. Fixed wireless networks consist of a directional antenna, like the one in the picture on your screen, that transmits to a device on a tower. Now that we've already seen how licenses look from a spectral view, we will now look at how these licenses look geographically. When the licenses were originally issued, the geographic coverage was a circle within a 35-mile radius. But when the FCC ruled that they were going to allow two-way services, the geographic coverage of the licenses changed. As I stated earlier, the fixed wireless networks use directional antennas, so even if there is an overlap in the licenses, both parties can operate successfully without interfering with one another by directing the antenna towards their tower. As they transitioned to mobile devices that did not have directional antennas, there was a need to take the overlapping areas and divide it amongst the two licenses, resulting in a process called splitting the football. Basically, if you imagine 2 overlapping circles, the overlapping portions might take on a football shape. That football shape was then split equally down the middle among the 2 licenses, hence the phrase splitting the football. And while this reduced the size of the licenses, it made them much more usable in a mobile environment. Sprint is the major player in this band. They currently lease the majority of EBS licenses. In 2013, Sprint's annual lease payments to educational institutions exceeded $300 million. Although Sprint leases the majority of the licenses, we have seen other operators enter into the EBS band. The increase in demand is largely due to the declining equipment costs associated with operating on EBS licenses. In fact, according to our research, there are over 50 operators around the country that have acquired 2.5 gigahertz rights. Now we will review some of the benefits that an educational entity would receive in leasing their educational broadband service to a commercial operator. When leasing to a commercial operator, the respective operator would develop the wireless infrastructure in the community, benefiting the school, students, faculty, and residents of the community. The development of the wireless in rural communities will be advantageous in bridging the digital divide and the homework gap. Per a lease agreement, the school or college would receive monthly royalty income by leasing to a commercial operator that can in turn be used to fund the overall educational mission. The FCC requires that a part of the license, specifically 5%, is reserved for educational purposes, and this is typically accomplished by giving the license holder a certain number of free devices that can be used on the network, which are also known as service credits. There is a smaller percentage of license holders that build and maintain their own network. Most license holders elect to lease their licenses to a commercial operator due to the expense of building and maintaining a network, but it is an option for those who have the funding. This is the part that most people will be interested in and where we will discuss the value of EBS licenses. There are a variety of factors that will affect valuation, but the most important is the population each license covers. Megahertz pop is a unit of measurement in spectrum. It can be looked at as what gallons are to water or cords are to wood. To determine the megahertz pop of a license, you would need to multiply the capacity, which is 22.5 megahertz for a typical license, by the population. In this example, we're going to use 120,000, which would give you a 2.7 million megahertz pop. Select Spectrum encourages bidders to offer 5 cents per megahertz pop for a rural license, but you will see offers higher and lower than the advised amount. Using the 5 cents per megahertz pop for this example, this would give a present value of $135,000 for the license. And the payment structure for this example would be $13,500 upfront to the license holder, $782 for the initial monthly payment with a 3% annual increase. The total payments over the maximum term to the license holder would be $459,876. In addition, the operator would also offer service credits or free devices, which are required by the FCC. Anyone that is interested in including their license in the auction should sign and return an offering agreement. If you do not have the agreement, please just send me an email and I will gladly send it over to you. You may also go to selectspectrum.com/SLA to download the agreement. Per the agreement, there are no fees to enter the auction, and Select Spectrum will only collect the commission in the event of a successful transaction. The license holder will be under no obligation to accept any offers, which makes for an excellent no-risk opportunity to receive value for licenses. We are extremely excited for our upcoming fall 2.5 gigahertz spectrum lease auction. First bids will be due by November 8th, with signed agreements due by November 1st for all parties that wish to participate in the upcoming auction. Our experience has shown that a competitive lease auction increases license values, streamlines transaction processes, and improves rights holders' negotiating leverage while providing a fair way for educational institutions to compare offers and potentially select a lessee. Now that we've gone over the background information about 2.5 gigahertz spectrum, I would like to spend some time talking about how a license holder can obtain maximum value offers and what license holders should expect when entering our auctions. I should clarify that even though we call it an auction, it is unlike an auction in many ways. This is not like a process similar to eBay where the bidders know what each other are bidding. It is a sealed process, and only Select Spectrum and the license holders will be aware of the value of the bids. The idea behind this is to create a competitive process that ensures license holders receive fair market value for their licenses. Once we receive the first bids, we will run our financial analysis and present the bids to license holders. From there, the process is in their hands. They can ask for another round of bidding, accept an offer, reject all offers. We will provide our advice, but ultimately the decision is on the license holder on how they would like to proceed. It is absolutely free to sign up for the auction, and Select Spectrum will only collect a commission in the result of a successful transaction. All we need is a signed offering agreement, and we will include the license in the auction. To date, we have over 90 completed transactions as a result of this process, and many more deals in the negotiation phase. In our previous auction, bidders submitted more than 132 bids totaling over $30 million. The bids ranged from less than 4 cents per megahertz pop to greater than 20 cents per megahertz pop. I will now take any questions. If anyone thinks of a question later or would like additional information or a copy of the offering agreement, my contact info is on your screen, so don't hesitate to reach out.